Hello and welcome to the skating lesson. My name is Dave Leese, and today I am thrilled to welcome world and Olympic coach, broadcaster, and third at the 1979 British Championships, Carolane. Carol, welcome to the skating lesson.
Hi, Dave. Nice to be here. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, lovely to see you. The first question, why are you here and not in China? Your team is currently leading the Four Continents Championships. It's an international competition. There are so many coaches who would be dying to be in the kiss and cry for that FaceTime right now. Why are you not there?
Well, sometimes you have to live vicariously through other people, right? So, I work with Yuris Razgalayev and my husband, John, and our other coach, Marc-Andre Savant. So we like to sort of take turns at doing things. And the kids are always great about who goes where, Not a huge fan these days of doing those great long trips, I have to say. I did Beijing, and fortunately or unfortunately for us, we had 3 China events this year: Cup of China, the final, and now this one. And that's a lot. And that's a lot. And I did a lot of other things too. So when Yuris and I were sort of divvying things up, we decided he would do 2 and I would do 1. So that was how it worked out. But sometimes I'm always torn, because when I'm there, I'm always thinking, God, maybe I should have stayed home, And when I'm not there, I'm thinking, oh, maybe I should have gone. You never quite get it right, no matter how it goes. But as long as they skate well, doesn't matter. So.
Well, my friend was just on an airplane sitting next to you and said you have great opinions, and you say in such a wonderful accent, and he was just obsessed. So
it's lovely. And they were so charming, because I had an adventure on that trip to Lithuania, let me tell you, and culminating in my bag not being there. And Ilias and Lucy were just lovely. They wouldn't abandon me at the airport. They waited for me and made sure, I got my bag reported and everything. They were just lovely. So that was really, really nice. I was very appreciative of that. He was just great.
Oh, good. Well, how are you rating the team's performance? First of all, what time do you get up to watch your team when they're competing at 4 continents?
I don't.
You don't?
No, I don't. I have this kind of rule, and my kids kind of laugh at me. If I'm not there, I don't watch. I've only ever done it once, and I got up in the middle of the night in Beijing for the team event. And that was the free dance in the team event where Piper had the mishap in the lift. Okay. And I'm like, well, I'm never doing that again. So that shows you should never mess with the streak, which is one of my big things. If something's working, you don't change it around. So I always wait until I get the message from Yuris. Mm-hmm. And then I can kind of, am I either wild with euphoria or plunged into despair? It's one or the other. But today it was euphoria, so that was really good. I was happy.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, do you check the protocol and start going through the judges? When do you go on skatingscores.com and start to look at that?
Well, not now. No, I'm actually not that person. Afterwards, I like everything to be done. Mm-hmm. And then I start to do my homework. Mm-hmm. I watched them as soon as I knew the result. I went and watched the video and already started my list of things that I like. We can do a little better. Or it's a much shorter list now, I'm happy to say. But I don't really go there that much. I'm very focused on them. Mm-hmm. Or my team, and not just them, but whichever is my team. And my criteria is kind of, what do I have to do to improve them? Because it doesn't matter what anybody else got or what anybody else did. That can't affect me in any way. Mm-hmm. But I need to be clear about what we're going to do next to go to the next level that we want to go to. So I will, over the next little while, I will absorb all that information, but I do it quite gradually.
Mm-hmm. Where is your team within your plans for the season? Are you happy with their progress? Do you need to light a little bit of a fire over the next weeks before Worlds? How are you feeling about this?
Actually, Dave, I'm pretty happy. Mm-hmm. The thing I think that maybe people don't sort of kind of get is the last couple of, well, last year, obviously, Piper was very ill. And so over the course of the season, everybody is looking to grow their programs. I always say the sound of coaches in the fall is tweak, 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 because you're always trying to just, you know, do a little better. And when they perform, it's different. You know, you can see them do it in practice every day, but as soon as they perform.
What makes us such a good coach is the never-ending supply of tea.
Tea.
Yes. You are very helpful. So
that's how I do it.
You know, this is a crazy story, but when I studied abroad in London, my my roommate passed away, and they had put us in a grief room at Luton Airport, and they brought in tea for us there at the moment, and I couldn't believe it, but I will always just the British and tea, and it's wonderful.
British and tea, that's it. And I'm actually a huge coffee drinker, huge.
Okay.
But at this time of the day, it's tea time for me.
All right. What kind of tea are you drinking?
PG tips.
What are PG tips? What is this?
Oh, it's a British tea. It's a British tea. There's PG tips and Thai Fu and all kinds of other things. It's just your typical British tea.
It's not like English breakfast, right? That's not my favorite tea.
No. I like Earl Grey. It's funny, it's the water that makes the difference, I find.
How do you do your water?
British water is different. I can't tell you why. It just is. When I go to England, I drink way more tea than I do here. Here, I'm basically probably a cup a day person, but I have to have one.
Okay.
But in England, it's nonstop.
Okay.
You know, it's just tea morning to night. And it solves every problem. There's no question. It solves every problem. But anyway, as we were saying, so you know, last year Piper was ill. So our only goal last year was to try to get back to where we were before she had her surgery. But there was no opportunity to grow the programs or try to do anything with them. And the other thing that's impacted them a lot is the last couple of years, they've been very lucky and very appreciative to have a lot of shows in the spring. Well, that means they've started training for the next season much, much later, you know, mid to late July. And then with the first competition being Skate Canada, which is October. Well, that's not a very long time to choreograph 2 programs and get them ready. So at some point, you have to stop the choreo and start getting competition ready, doing the run-throughs, building the muscle memory, because every time you tweak something, it takes a little bit, and you go back to what they call the thinky stage, where you're not performing as much. You're thinking, okay, now it's this, that arm goes there, we change that direction, and they might be very small things, but small things have a very big impact, and they take time. Everything takes, for me, more time than people really understand that it does. And then once you've done that, Skate Canada rolls around, then you're in it, right? Then it's that one, then it's your next one, and then hopefully it's the final. And then you have to have a little break, and then it's nationals. So in between all of those things, my process is, I always call it a triage. As I say, I make a list of all the things that I think need to be done, and then we put them in order of importance and understand that in this amount of time, we can maybe only do this one or these 2. And so we do that. If that works really quickly and really well, maybe we can add another one, but maybe not. You don't know. So that becomes your process. And then, you know, after the final, they have a little break. Then it's nationals. You know, it's Christmas and it's nationals, and then another little break, and then off you go to 4 continents. So you're rolling along all the time, and at the same time, you still got to do the run-throughs. You got to get competition ready again. So it's a very complex process, I think, and not as simple as perhaps people think it is. The kids make it look so easy. They make everything look easy, those top teams, even the juniors. I mean, the juniors are phenomenal, but it's not easy. And you can see by, you know, when people have injuries and all the concussions and things that we get, they're pushing themselves really, really hard all the time. So for me, what we've been able to do this year, and kind of what I'm really excited about, is we have been able to grow the programs. We've been able to make those adjustments, make those changes to get them better. And I have to say, I really saw it here at Soucisse. That was for me the best rhythm dance they've done. All the things that we tweaked, I'm hoping now I'm at the end of the tweaking, and now I can just go for perfection.
Why are we seeing so many concussions in ice dance right now? Is it the rotational lifts? Is it the holds? Is it the requirements? Why do we see so many?
It's a lot of it's a lot to do with the lifts. And I've been one of the people who, you know, we have all these dance meetings every competition about the rules. That's another
John Redstadt at the competition. Yes.
Sean and Hillary and, you know, all the gang, and they're all great. You can see they all want to try to do the best to push ice dancing forward. And I get that. And I want to do that too. But I think, you know, in dancing for what we call the short lifts, we have the 7-second rule, that everything has to be accomplished, picked up and put down within that 7 seconds. But at the same time, we're making more and more requirements of the athletes with regards to entrances, exits, positions, changes of positions. And you can't defy the laws of physics. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, the kids are always very ambitious. They want to try all these very difficult things, and that's great. But for me, if we're going to require all that stuff, we need to give them a bit more time to do it. We've really upped the requirements, but we haven't upped the time.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the time, because this is a later question, but there was a lot of controversy at Junior Worlds last year, right? About extended lifts, and your team won the bronze medal. The British team got an extended lift. The British team said that the Canadians had an extended lift. I did the whole thing with a timer on my computer. It's very murky, and it is hard to tell with some of the entrances when someone really left the ground due to the camera angle, if they're doing like an axel entry into lift. Yeah. At the end of the day, the only conclusion I came to is, does it really matter if someone does all of those in 12 seconds or 13 seconds? Does that make them a better ice dancer or lifter? Because couldn't it be harder to hold the lift for longer if you think in
yeah. I mean, it could be harder to do anything. I think the main reason for restricting the lift time is they don't want us to look like pairs. That's been the main, you know, ice dancing has moved very acrobatically to me. I'm not necessarily sure that that's a great thing, but okay, if that's what we're doing, that's what we're doing. But some people, you know, if you have a team that have a very similar height, they don't have a lot to work with that. It's way easier for a team with more of a height difference to do those more acrobatic lifts. If the girl is very small and the guy is nice and big and muscular, then it helps. When you're the same size, it's sometimes more tricky. Not everybody has an acrobatic body. Not every boy is as strong as, say, I'll use Paul and who can I? Oh, well, Evan Bates. You know, not everybody is as strong as they are. It takes time. But I know what you're saying. I don't think we need to go that far. I think it's almost like every time we add a more difficult requirement, we need to add 1 more second. Okay. So now we should be at 8 seconds, because when you do those, if you take a rollie, even, for example, if you go in with a double entry, let's say the boys in a spread and the girls doing an around the world, well, that around the world that's eaten probably 2 of your seconds. Mm-hmm. And then if you do, then you've got to do your 6 rotations. right? Then the girl's either got to be in a difficult position or she's got to change position. And then you've got to do some kind of exit. Now, in the rhythm dance, it's a little bit easier because you've only got the one lift to do. So all your options are open. In the free, when you can't repeat certain things, that's when it gets very complicated. In fact, I was having that discussion with one of my junior teams this morning who brought me a lift, you know, and they showed it to me. They'd done it on the floor. We're thinking of trying it. Oh, great, you know. And then I started to discuss that, and they're looking at me. And they looked at me exactly like I look at my accountant when she's talking about numbers. Like they just glaze over because they kind of get what I'm saying, but it's just so much. And there's so many things. I said, yes, all that will work, but then we have to consider now we have two other options left. We can only do this or this. And then we have to have this, this, or this. If we don't do that, and they're just like, oh my God. And that's what it feels like with lifts. It feels like you're just doing an endless jigsaw puzzle. And then sometimes I think it happened to the other Canadian team, Laurier Legat today. They lost their lift, which they've done several times in other competitions because it was adjudged to be an illegal element. I haven't watched it yet, so I don't know, but I know that happened. And then you're like, oh my God, now what do I do? Do I try and fix that? Or will that become a thing for me? And they're going to look for it again. And should I change it? So there's lots of things with lifts, very complex.
With all these requirements in the acrobatics, do you worry if the lift is musical or matches the music? When does that enter the conversation?
Yes. I mean, you try. I think every coach and choreographer is going to be well aware of that. And when you do your, what I call the plotting and scheming section, you know, I can use Wuthering Heights as an example, Paul and Piper's free dance this year. When we put that music together, it for me was absolutely obvious where all the elements should go. Right from the get-go, I knew exactly where the lifts were going to go, where the Coro Step was going to go, where the diagonal was going to go, where the spin was. We knew twizzles. It made perfect sense to us, and I think that was, you know, lucky that it worked out that way. And they have quite distinct pieces of music in there. That helps. When you have something that's not quite as distinct, you know, there are those programs that kind of wander on for 4 minutes and they're very ethereal and all the rest. That becomes more difficult, I think, to make something stand out. Mm-hmm. So yeah, for me, it's all about the music. The music should, in theory, dictate everything we're doing. But again, sometimes those pesky rules just get right in your way. You know, you want to do something fancy and clever and won't work.
So you talk about plotting and scheming. I know that Michelle Kwan used to have a plan for all of her practice sessions on Champions on Ice, and in every show she did Lutz, toe loop, and sow cow to maintain and really strengthen those jumps as her key jumps. Are there certain elements that you have Piper and Paul practice or that they practice when they're on tour to up that consistency so that you're not running from that far behind in July?
No, actually, I don't. They on tour are actually generally thinking about new things to do, and they usually come home with one or two things, you know, up their sleeve that they've come up with. In the last couple of years, one of their numbers has always been a piece of one of their free dances because we have had so little time. We're hoping to get 2 new numbers together this year. That's the plan. If they come back from 4 continents and I don't have to tweak, then we can move into doing those numbers, and we've got everything set up for those. So we're hoping that's going to be the case. But I think it's probably slightly different for dancers. You know, I can see where you would need to be doing the jumps to maintain your timing and maintain everything you're doing. But I think dancers, they don't really have that issue, especially when they're as experienced as those teams. Mm-hmm. You know, they pretty much can do anything you can throw at them whenever you want them to do it. So mm-hmm. not quite the same.
Don't
However,
have to keep the twizzles going, right? Like, is that a concern?
no, they can twizzle like bunnies. They really, both feet, any direction, any foot. Not really. I mean, if they feel like it, they'll do it. But they'll probably at that point be trying to come up with a new set. You know, how are we going to do something different with the twizzles and, you know, that kind of thing. But not repetition so much. In training during the year, yes, we do a lot of repetition, a lot. All of the teams, all of them.
Well, your team is thought of to have British technique. You're obviously British. And the International Academy in Montreal is also said to have British technique, but they really derive from France and Zazui and the work there. So what would you say is different in the techniques? Because the teams don't look the same, even in terms of skating skills.
That's a very good question. I don't really know. I think every school, as it goes along, develops a system that works for them. And it depends a lot on what your priorities are. And on the time you have available, the time the kids can skate, all of that stuff. So and there are, you know, you can take many schools and teams all over the world. Look at, you know, the Italians are great skaters. The work Matteo Zani's doing with the Czech teams, wonderful skaters. And I'm a big believer in building the skater first and then letting the discipline choose the skater, not the other way round. But everybody can benefit from being a good skater. And it's been sort of one of the core principles of our school that we build that probably first, or try to, you know.
Talk about that, because one of my questions for you is about, you know, I've heard that Piper and Paul do an hour of skating skills a day or stroking exercises. Can you talk about that? Like what part of your training?
We do, most of the time, all my teams skate together, or we have a junior session and a senior session. And regardless, each of those sessions begins with a half-hour technique class every day, always.
Who's the technique honcho?
We all are, but we all have our, you know, Eurus will do it one day. My husband, John, is, I think he lays at night thinking of things to do. Marc-Andre, we all have our own things that we like to do, but it all revolves around basically being on a circle all the time. And we kind of have made a class. We have like a basic routine that we do every day that all the kids know, involving edges and circles, that is like the core foundation of our technique, if you like. I mean, I don't really think of it as a specific technique. We don't necessarily do things the same way with everybody, but everybody learns that. Everybody learns to be on a circle and understand that every push has to begin in the same direction as the one that just finished, like figures. And I think that's a lot of what the successful schools have done. They figured out a way to keep the circle technique going in all of the basic work that they do. And everybody will have their own system for doing that. But ours is what we call class. And then it will evolve, you know, from those basic exercises that we do, sometimes in shadow, sometimes together, sometimes with cones. There's all different ways of doing it.
So how close is your technique to like Betty Calloway, Torvill Dean technique, you know, in terms of like the Holy Grail, where of British ice dance?
I think that's a really hard question because skating has changed so much.
But the British think that they invented ice dance. So are you, you know...
ice dancing today is not what it was when I skated. And my husband was on the world team that got the Grand Slam, you know, which is Fordenthaler, Suddick and Cannon and John Lane and Janet Sawbridge. And they're the only nation other than the Russians to ever do a Grand Slam at Worlds. And Miss Hogg, Gladys Hogg, taught all of them. We all come from, I was taught by her too at the end of my career. And I think a lot of what we do stems back to her. Betty was also a Miss Hogg aficionado, and I think you can see. I mean, Christopher Dean will say, if you haven't got the 8 basic edges, you don't have anything, and I totally subscribe to that theory. Totally.
Where is Mark Hanratty from, and does he have the 8 basic edges? Like, are you okay with his 8 edges?
Mark Hanratty?
Yeah.
He's a lovely commentator.
He's also a lovely skater. He's on Dancing on Ice.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know, but you see, I don't really see that very often. And I've only seen him once in a while. But yes, I mean, he was a lovely skater.
He's extending his free leg so that you could see it across the pond, right? Yeah.
So he's got that lovely, I think what the British were more known for than anything was their very soft knees. That was even going back to, Courtney Jones and Doreen Denny, going even right back there. That was really one of the things. And I remember as a little girl skating with my first dance coach, Bernard Spencer, who was a wonderful dancer. And just the feeling of skating, I still remember the feeling of skating with him was like flying. It was like the best thing you could possibly imagine. And because we grew up in that, the way we did in England, where you had the dance intervals on the public sessions, and then everybody would go skate with each other or skate with their coaches. So you grew up, first of all, skating with all kinds of people, which made partnering super easy in the end when you got down to the, the big stuff, because you'd skated with so many people and skated as a guy, skated as a girl. I was never taught any dances except the preliminary foxtrot and the quick step, of all things. Everything else I learned myself by following men's and ladies' steps and all the holds. I was never taught anything. I just wanted to dance. So I watched and I learned. And because of the way it was in England with these dance intervals, I had that opportunity. North America is a very different system. But then we would go skate with our coaches. And so by osmosis, you picked up that natural rolling, soft knee bend that I think is so attractive when you see it. If you go back and watch Jane and Chris, like, oh my God, it's just phenomenal.
Do you use group lessons then with your students to kind of keep that learning via osmosis alive?
Well, we're old now, Dave.
I said with your students, right?
Now, dear, it's a little bit more. It was funny because I was doing something with Piper and Paul the other day, and I got on the ice and I got a hold of Paul and I looked at him and I went, now remember, I'm not her. Take the old lady round the corner, please. So he laughed his head off, because I've had him since he was 8. So I did skate with him a bit, although he came with a partner. So even when he was little, but we did, when we were younger, we skated all the time with our kids, and we did see it. They grew up with that. Now we have them all skate with each other during the group lessons a lot of the time. So the younger ones get it from the other ones, which is great. So we try to pass that on, but ourselves, we're not good enough to skate with those kids anymore. I'd die. I'd go once around the rink and die. It'd be terrible.
I wanted to ask you about the International Academy of Montreal. Barbara Fusar-Poli has spoken out about, what it's like to compete against it. I mean, you essentially have a school of 30-something teams with a marketing agency attached to it. How challenging is that to, one, promote your team? I mean, if they want to promote their team, they can have On Ice Perspectives just put out that video to the world.
Yeah.
But I do notice that Piper and Paul show more training clips than other teams do on their social media, which I thought is perhaps strategic, right? And interesting. You know, how do
You
you?
were doing it. And actually Nadiia and Peter do the same thing. And I think, you know, that comes of being young and in that world. To be honest, Dave, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what other people do. It's not my world. And again, it has no impact on me, really. I'm just doing my job. Hopefully, if my job is good enough and my skaters are good enough, I will achieve what I want to achieve. If they don't, they don't. You know, we have a very nice website that my son actually does for me. A little bit of a family affair there. So, and the kids, though, they've got their Instagram things. We do things on Instagram. I've never wanted to be the Costco of ice dancing. I'm a boutique operation. That's me. And that's what I like. You know, I've had years where I've had like 14, 15 teams. It's really freaking hard. I mean, I take my hat off to Montreal for managing all that. But I kind of realized when I did that, the thing that I like is that no matter, I may not be teaching you today, you're off working with Mark or Eurus or John, you know, but I'm there and I clock every single thing you do all the time, every day. So if there's something happening that you're doing that I don't like, I'll wriggle over to Mark, who's teaching, go, you know what, that mohawk in the Rock Foxtrot, I don't like the way that's facing. We talked about that, la, la, la. And so for me, that's how I work the best. And I find even if I go away to a competition for a week, I come back and I feel slightly adrift, you know, I feel like, okay, what's everybody doing? Because things move fast. You come back in a week and they've done this and they've done that and they've added this and you go, oh, whoa. So I might spend a morning, I always call it playing catch up. This is my catch up morning. And I go and stand with Eurus and who he's teaching. And I'll just listen and watch and see what they did. And that's how it works best for me. So, you know, I guess you have to be comfortable and at peace with what you're doing. And there's no doubt it's very hard to compete against, you know, a sort of large machine like that. But there's good work being done all over the world by lots of people. And I think it's important to remember that. You know, it's very easy to and obviously if you have a lot of teams and you get a lot of good teams, well, then you're going to look good. But, you know, you can have, I always remember being at nationals years ago, and I taught a team called Caris, Ralph and Asher Hill. I don't know if you remember Caris and Asher. Yeah. They were lovely, just lovely. I love them to pieces. And they were going into junior. And I remember there was a school at the time that had, you know, tons of teams, and we had them. And I was on the practice, and I remember saying to John, oh, it must be really nice to have a lot of teams like that, you know, all really good and la, la, la. And he just looked at me and he went, you only need one good one. And it's true.
Well, I always think about it, you know, and I've seen coaches at rinks, you know, get a lot of students and there's so much exhaustion and mental energy.
Oh, yeah.
And there's nothing that I hate more than, you know, there's a team this season and I look, okay, rhythm dance, Prince, free dance, Umbrellas of Cherbourg. And I said, well, seen it before, you know. You know, is that possible to be that inventive with that many teams? I don't really think it is.
Oh, it must be very difficult. I mean, you have, I have what I feel is an extremely broad knowledge of music because I'm so old, you know, that really helps. I was actually alive in the 80s, so there you go.
Why is that rhythm dance such a flop this year? Because I have an 80s playlist. I love so much music for the 80s. Everyone is going Footloose or Expected, and it's such a flop.
I don't know. I think the samba part kind of threw everybody for a loop because I think that's been a tricky thing to finesse. And yes, there is a lot of 80s music. I was happy that, you know, Nobody picked what we picked for Piper and Paul. Nobody picked what we picked. Well, Nadiia and Peter, I picked the Duran Duran because I've been wanting to do Wild Boys for years. And I said, you're doing it. Partly because it was a big departure for them. They're a very classical style team. So, you know, I wanted to push them out of their zone. And they did it phenomenally well. And then they wanted to use In Excess. And I said, fine, but I'm just telling you, a lot of people will use that. Oh, do you think so? I do. And they did. But that was okay because they did it really well and they enjoyed it. And they will next time, you know, perhaps think, okay, maybe we'll go slightly a little bit further off piste and pick something a little more unusual. But sometimes when you go with the unusual stuff, it doesn't sell because, as you say, you go Prince Umbrellas of Cherbourg for the judging panel. That's a really easy fix, right? They can just go. They don't have to think. I always say when you make the judges think, you're probably in trouble to a certain extent.
Well, you're in bigger trouble if they're bored.
That's true too. I don't disagree with you. So, but walking that tightrope of finding something unusual and interesting and doing the other stuff is hard. It's very hard. And I find too, you know, we've done a lot of programs now, and it does get harder every year to think, okay, now I've got to find something new. And the kids are funny because they're so young, you know, and they'll bring you something and they play like 1 second and I'm singing it. I'm singing, oh yeah, oh, you know that. Yeah, I know that. I'm probably going to know every piece of music you're going to bring me, you know. And sometimes you have to let them, it depends on what year it is. Like you have to let them try things. I will never let anybody do something that I think is a complete miss. You know, I will fight to the death. But sometimes they have to learn, particularly as they get older, they have to be in that collaborative process. And they have to learn, okay, we did this. It was a good experiment, but it's not really us. Mm-hmm. So where do we go next? You know, I think there was a great deal, you know, like I'll use Papadakis and Cizeron after their programs, everybody wanted to do, you know, that kind of thing. But the problem is they weren't Papadakis and Cizeron, right? And you have to be a very certain type to pull that kind of thing off and make it interesting. So, you know, for me, that's when the kids will bring me something that they've done, it's always like, no, like don't bring me Bolero either, you know.
I mean, happiness does not wait. It's a certain sort of life experience and, you know, melancholy, introspective kind of, and there was a young skater doing it at the rink and I thought, this is not for you, right? You talk about people, you know, not looking like Papadakis and Cizeron, and they have those very specific long lines and specific kind of flexibility and extension.
Yeah.
Piper and Paul are known as kind of the Corky Team, and that's kind of been along the way. How did that develop? Because I think when I remember their first program, they had something about the circus animals. That's the first one.
It was Sweet Dreams.
Okay.
It's Sweet Dreams. That's what it was, the first free dance. And Christopher Dean did that free dance for them.
Because I remember Paul with Vanessa, she was in red, he was in blue.
Yeah, she had the little sticking out tutu.
Yes. So what, you know, how did this kind of, Piper and Paul are super quirky. Is it their personalities off ice? Is that kind of their body extension? I know she does not have, you know, the long lines and the leg extension. So
I think they've been very good about exploring things, very good about trying new things. I mean, the year after that, we did the Wild Spirits program where we just tried to do the freakiest things any of us could think of. And then there were always, for me, the two characters she was meant to play, which was the Hitchcock blonde.
It was the best free dance they ever did, right?
And Evita.
And the second best free dance they ever did.
It was those two people for me. Yes. And Paul, I always say, you know, we always say, Paul is not in I want to say real life, that sounds awful, but is not in everyday life how he appears to be when he skates, because he's very funny. He's really funny. He's always he's the one that knows everybody's program. You know, he has an eidetic memory, so he sees something once and he can do it, and he remembers everything. I call him the rule book, because the rules come out, he reads them, and then after that, it's just like I said to him, you realize that I'm going to be calling you when you retire, when the rules come out every day, because you're going to have to come and tell me what's going on. So he's very he is a quirky personality, but on the ice he appears quite serious. And you know, I think when he did the disco program, that was when you really saw, and actually Hitchcock, because he really looked psychotic in that program. He did a really good job with that. But the disco one was where he really kind of let loose for the first time and embraced that and let that side of him come out.
Yeah, I thought the Hitchcock program, I thought they should have gone to the Olympics that year. I felt that was the stronger free dance personally.
That was the year he broke his leg, Dave.
Yep, the program was so good. Okay.
I know. But
a magic program like that, you can't. And last year you had the magic program, and I wanted to ask you, who came up with the part where they knelt down on the ice, center ice last season? I think it was the choreo sequence. That was
and did the thing?
Yes, I loved it. Oh yeah, it was drama. It was everything. Yeah.
Eurus always says, I'm good at the twiddly bits, you know?
What are the twiddly bits? I always say that I like the parts of skating that don't count for anything, but they're all...
Me too. But I always tell the kids, right? Nobody goes home from a competition and says, oh, that bracket, oh my God, you should have seen, oh, the Choctaw, oh my, they don't. They remember that. They remember the twiddly bits. Like Piper they have those couple of little jumpy things this year in the short, and the thing where she goes under his neck in the rhythm dance. Those are the things you remember. It's the twiddly bits. The hooks, I call them the hooks. Every program has to have a hook, hopefully more than one. And those, I think that was where, if you go back again, I'll use Torval and Dean as an example, their Paso Doble OSP. If you hadn't seen him drag her up the ice 3 times, it wouldn't have had the same impact. If you could have only seen that once, it would. But the crowd were waiting, and by the time they got to the 3rd pattern, like the place was on fire. And that's kind of what we don't get the opportunity to do that much now. You know, those repetition things. So I tried to put that in the rhythm dance this year in a couple of places.
Do the rules prevent those iconic programs?
I think it's harder. I would have, I mean, I'll take Tessa and Scott as another example, who are people I think have a tremendous body of work behind them in terms of different programs, different styles, I would have loved to have seen what they would have done if they'd have been in Torval and Dean's time, and vice versa. Like, how would Jane and Chris have reacted to this structure? You know, I think it's certainly, things can't help but look the same when you're trying to get points. Jane and Chris weren't trying to get points. They were trying to do the most interesting things that had ever been done, and they did. And their work, for me, stands today as monumental. And quite often I'll show my kids something that they've done, and they'll go, oh, that's easy, we want to try that. Yeah, you go right ahead. Can't do it. Where
do you rank Moulin Rouge? I would say that was a masterpiece at the Olympics, that final version.
I think they hit it out of the, and here's the thing, right? I'm not a Moulin Rouge fan. Not at all. Don't like the music, didn't like the movie, nothing. But they sold me completely. It was fabulous.
Well, what's the hook for Wuthering Heights? You know, Jonathan is team Wuthering Heights. I love the novel. I studied the novel. To me, the movie score isn't strong enough for what is being portrayed. You know, I want there to be more highs and lows in the music from the movie. So what am I missing? Sell me on the Wuthering Heights program.
Well, here's the thing, right? I think the great thing about art is not that it answers questions, but that it asks them. And there you are, right? And as you say, it's polarizing in a way. And I kind of like that. I like that you've got your opinion and Jonathan's got his opinion, and then somebody else will have another one. My kind of feeling that I love the novel and I love the 1939 movie. I just love it. And it's been interesting to me how it's really about how you can love somebody so much and yet still hate them. And that love and hate are really just extreme forms of the same emotion. And there were a couple of things that I was thinking about when we did it, and one of them was, you know, in Romeo and Juliet, my only love sprung from my only hate. And that to me is very much Heathcliff and Cathy, that they are so unutterably cruel to each other. It's horrible. It's a horrible story, really. And then I don't know if you remember the movie The War of the Roses. Do you remember that movie about
I know the movie. I know the reference to it. I haven't seen it in a million years.
So the couple, you know, are young, they get married, they're totally in love. And then 10 years later, they can't stand the sight of each other, or longer than that. And they have this house that they've rebuilt. And they won't agree to sell the house. So they kind of move into half of the house each. And it's war. It's war. And at the very end, the house is destroyed. And they are literally hanging from the ceiling on these chandelier thing that's about to break. And it breaks and they fall to the floor. And they're dying. They're dying on the floor. And at the very end, the guy reaches out for her hand and you think, oh, and she goes, and even at the end, in death, like that's what we do at the end of the Wuthering Heights. Even at the end, in death, they're not gonna reconcile. So there's things I have to do, things that speak to me, you know, again, the little things that I want to get in there. And I wanted that sort of shadow and darkness. And Cathy is such a mercurial character, and he is such a dour, brooding, I mean, horribly mistreated person. Horribly. So those are the thoughts behind it. And then, of course, you have to skate and get points. In the middle of all that. But those were kind of my feelings when we discussed it and wanted to put it together. That it was really about that, about love, but about how love is not always kind and not always merciful and not always love.
Yeah. How do you feel about all of the teams being so into the judges' space, into the judges' personal space? They seem, so a lot of people are getting sick of it. What do you think of it?
Well, again, our one at the beginning of the Coro Step is the part in the novel where Cathy reaches through the window, you know, and that was it. That part is called The Hand Through the Window for me. And that was why we did it. So it is attached to the storyline for me. I think it's just, I didn't do it for any other reason. I've never done that before. So, and I probably won't do it again. But in this particular storyline and the way that they come out of the lift and it just rolls round into that, it felt like exactly where I wanted it to go. That's the part where she would reach through the window and get yanked back out. So, I think it can be fun. It can be interesting. But like you say, if everybody starts to do it, it loses some impact.
Is
I
it
didn't.
derived from the requirements of the rule that you have to be within so close of the boards? You know,
You do have to be boards to boards, pretty much.
because Ilias and Lucy lost the whole element, you know, last year at a
I
competition.
know.
They were not right near those boards. So it makes sense to me that people are doing that
Yeah.
as
It's an insurance. I call those insurance policies.
Mhm.
Like, oh yeah, we're going to top and tail this, even though we don't have to, because it's an insurance policy. If something goes wrong, you've still got that. But yeah, the choreo step has been a bit of a there are times when I like it and times when I don't like it, you know, because I think anything choreographically should be defined by the musical space. The music should be telling you. With Nadiia and Peter this year, for example, I did, instead of going this way, we were one of the few people who took that new rule, and we went end to end because it was the March of the Capulets, because they did Romeo and Juliet. So it made perfect sense to go straight down the rink. And I like that. I like the fact that we've been given different options. I like that. But yeah, you're always going to find the ones that you like and the ones that you don't like, right? I think for me, the big deal is that there should be skating in those choreo step sequences. It shouldn't be all about standing on the spot and posing. That it should be skating. It should be predominantly skating. If you have a stop or you have something on the spot, that's fine. But there are the ones I don't like is where there are sustained pauses for standing around, sort of thing.
Push-ups, is that okay?
Well, you know, to each his own, right?
Okay, well, I'm just asking. You said you didn't like sustained pausing, and I said, how do you feel about a push-up? It just feels natural. Yeah.
Well, if that's what the music told them to do, they did the right thing. Right? Would I do that? I don't know. I didn't do that program, so I don't know. Again, everybody has to march to their own tune. That's what makes it interesting.
Well, let's talk about interest. You know, Skate Canada
do it.
recently did not have their nationals broadcast. You are a broadcaster. How bad is that for skating in Canada?
Well, we were very sad about that. CBC, I mean, I can only speak from, you know, I know very little about the ins and outs of it, but CBC did not have a contract with Skate Canada, and that was why it didn't get done. And so it all went to the streaming system. Why that happened, I don't know. You know, I'm not involved in those discussions or negotiations or anything. I just show up and talk if they ask me to. But I think any time skating disappears from the mainstream, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. The more we can get it out there, and I wish there was some way to somehow get those two sides together to get that situation resolved. But like I say, I don't know why that happened. It just that's what I know.
And without the TV lights, the arena looks dark on TV.
I know.
Dressing.
It's a shame for the kids too, right? You know, that's their big thing of the year. Nationals is huge. I think it doesn't matter if you're a 10-time national champion or you're going to come 15th in juniors. It's a huge deal. Everybody loves it. And to this day, you know, my kids will say nationals is one of the things they've enjoyed the most about skating.
Yeah. How much does it hurt when nationals doesn't have a crowd? You know, how much of a difference was it coaching there? Because, you know, the Calgary, it was very cold. There wasn't a lot of emotion. How much did that?
Interestingly enough, I didn't go to nationals because I went to Europeans in Lithuania, which was unbelievable. Like, that's probably the best skating event I have ever been to, bar none. I mean, I've been to a few good ones, but that was sensational. So I wasn't at nationals, but of course I saw the videos, and it was just terribly sad. Just really sad. But I mean, the weather was terrible. It was like minus 65. You can understand people not wanting to go outside. I wouldn't have wanted to go outside. Dreadful. And that rink is beautiful in Calgary, because that's where we were for Junior Worlds last year. It's a fantastic facility. But unfortunately, if you don't have a big skating community there, and there's not a lot of advertising, which I understand there wasn't, You know, I always think, well, bring the schools in for free, at least for the practices. Give the Skate Canada clubs maybe a discount, you know, buy 100 tickets and, you know, get them at a cheaper price. But again, I don't know how that works. And I'm sure the people that do know how that works would tell me, well, Carol, it's not as easy as that. Because one thing I've learned, it's very easy to criticize, you know, committees and organizations and all the rest of it when you're on the outside. But I have been fortunate enough to go on the board of directors at my club for the last 3 or 4 years. And I have seen from the inside, and that's, you know, a smaller scale than Skate Canada or anything like that, just how difficult it is to get things done. It's really hard. And I can, you know, I can say I was one of the people that would say, oh, you know, the board didn't do this and the board didn't do that. And then I got there and I thought, oh, so my big thing now is, let's not talk about the problem. If you've got a problem with what Skate Canada are doing, join them and work from the inside. Work from the inside to help them and provide ideas to make things better. Because nothing is achieved by continually bitching about the problems, ever. You've got to go for, I'm a solution person. I'll talk about the problem once and then I want to fix it by doing, you know, this. Well, you can't do that. All right, well, let's try this. I'm that person. And like I say, going on the board of my club was a big eye-opener for me. So I think it would be, you know, I know Skate Canada is now looking for people to go on committees and things. Join. Become part of the solution. That's the way to go. And I know, you know, I know how hard it is and it's very easy to bitch. So I try not to do that. I can have my disagreements, but I find it's always best to, if you have something to say, find a person and tell them respectfully and thoughtfully what you think the problem is and ask if you can help be a part of that solution. You get way further by doing that. It doesn't help. Attacking for me is never a good idea. I'm not that person. I just don't do it.
I wanted to ask you about broadcasting because you speak very frankly. You give your opinion. You're known as a saucy commentator. We're going to know what you think. We love it, right? It did seem like Caitlin and Kirsten were, you know, inexperienced broadcasters and they were almost afraid to give constructive criticism of the programs. How do you navigate that?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I mean, I was super lucky when I started doing it. And I had no training, no experience, no nothing. I just plonked down in front of that, go, you know, I was like, whoa, help. And I had to do a lot of work to think about how to do it. But I was so lucky in having Kurt Browning. I can't even tell you how much he helped me. He was phenomenal. And I didn't really know him before I started to, just to say hello and goodbye. You know, you don't see these people very often. And we've become, I would like to say, and I hope he agrees with me, really good friends. He's such a lovely person. I learned so much. He's so professional. He is very comfortable in that role. It was a little hard for me because coaching at the same time, I was very aware of not wanting to, what's the word? Promote my own skaters, if you like. That's a simplistic way of putting it, but really trying to be super fair in my assessments and how I went about talking about things. But I think Caitlin and Kirsten just, you have to, it's like everything else. You have to practice. You don't just sit down in front of a microphone and you're good at it. Well, maybe some people are. I wasn't. I can quite honestly say if I look back at, you know, some of the first things I did, but because I had Kurt, he and I when we started in the booth, they were going to put me on the end, right? And I'm going, no, I can't go on the end. And Brenda Irvin, and Kurt looked at me and went, why not? And I said, I have to go in the middle so that if I do something wrong, both of you can kick me. They're like, so that's how I ended up being in the middle, just because if anything was going wrong, they could quickly come to my assistance, because I just, you're very conversant of not wanting to make a big mess, and it's a big deal doing that on national television. It was I felt a huge responsibility, huge, and tried to do a good job, and really enjoyed it, and was very fortunate. But like I say, Kurt, Caitlin and Kirsten are both inexperienced. So I think if they had Kurt with them, or somebody like Kurt, it would help them tremendously, and probably give them the confidence to do more. But I what I heard, I didn't hear everything, but what I heard, I thought they did a really good job. And it's hard. Like I say, it's, again, easy to be critical, but try it and see how you get along. It's not easy.
Now, they obviously didn't make this decision, but Nikolai Sorensen didn't compete at Canadian Nationals, and neither did Marjorie and Zach. And it was never brought up on the broadcast, which I think for a viewer is very confusing, because everybody is wondering who's going to get the spots for Worlds. Why aren't Marjorie and Zach here? Do you think that was a mistake by the broadcasters to not inform the audience and just deal with the situation head on?
Well, the only thing I can say is that we're kind of assuming that everybody who's watching knows who those people are, which isn't necessarily true. I mean, the skating aficionados all know who they are. Joe Public doesn't, however many of them were watching. And the skating aficionados all know those stories anyway.
People didn't know why Marjorie and Zach had...
No. But again, I understand when Piper was ill last year, we chose not to make public the big story. We went with a smaller story because it was her business. But everybody knew she was ill and that she'd had surgery. I'm not quite sure why they didn't talk about Marge and Zach. I'm just so sad for Marjorie, because she's such a warm, bright spark. I love having her at competitions. She's so much fun. She's just so much fun. And it's really a shame for her that this has happened. And I really do hope she recovers soon. As I understand, and I can't speak to the veracity of this, so if feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I understand that the concussion wasn't caused from hitting her head. It was from whiplash. She fell and whiplashed, and you can get concussion so easily from all sorts of things. So perhaps they asked for it not to be said. Who knows?
I know Skate Canada is having financial issues, and maybe their staff isn't up to speed. I find it confusing, though, that Nikolai Sorensen and Laurence, they withdrew from Canadian Nationals. They're at 4 continents. What changed in that time, and what is the decision making? And nobody is saying anything. And I feel like it's not positive to the public, right? I don't think for skating in general. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think for everybody concerned in that situation, it's really, very upsetting for everybody. And I really hope that for all of them, there is a timely and respectful solution to whatever is happening. Perhaps it's as simple as we really don't know what to say, so we're just not going to say anything. So perhaps that was it. Like I say, I don't know. But it must be very difficult for all concerned, and very difficult to say what any of us would do in that situation.
Now, the funding issue with Skate Canada, have you seen a decrease in funding with developmental teams? Obviously, Corey Cercelli switched to compete for Italy. That got some attention, due to the funding envelope situation with Skate Canada. Has there been a decrease in funding?
Now, this is going to sound extremely disingenuous, but it's absolutely true. I really take no interest in what my kids get for funding. I don't know what they get. I don't know what any of them get for anything. It's their business. I'm not involved. I'm not involved in any of their financial dealings at all. I'm very happy when they get funding. That makes me happy. It makes them happy. Extra 0.5, as one of my coaches would have said in the olden days. But I don't concern myself necessarily ever, unless they were to come to me and say something, which none of them have done. So I think that's a situation that each individual skater and team has to deal with for themselves. Obviously, I think all the federations, if you look all over the world, financially, it's not easy for any of them.
In the US, I was going to bring up, not to attack Canada, in the US, there's a lot of talk about assignments, and there are be a lot of grouping, right? So if a coach has 2 teams, maybe they'll be more incentivized to put them at one competition so that they can send one coach instead of 2, and things like that are being talked about.
And I think that's a positive step. If you can, because again, it's to take a coach with you when you're the only team is a very expensive proposition. And if there isn't a lot of funding, my team, who are now representing Ireland, Carolane and Shane, and just having a ball doing that, I want to say they're really happy, and we went to Europeans and just skated great. But we are using that because they're self-funding some things now. There's not the funding that the big federations have. So they went to a competition in Turkey and they were looked after by another coach who was going to be there. And they're off to the Enya Trophy. And that same coach is going to look after them there because it's less expensive for them to do that than take me or yours. And that's fine. And the part I like about that, and what I see happening more, and that makes me very happy, is that coaches all over the world are actually banding together to help each other out in those situations, which I think is a hugely positive step. There's always been that, there's always that little bit of people don't want to lose their skaters. They don't want to.
But if this person that's helping you out is going to know more things about the twiddly bits, that are gonna.
I doubt anybody knows more about the twiddly bits than me. I will put my twiddly bits up against anybody's twiddly bits. I don't have that issue. If somebody knows more about me than something, that's great as far as I'm concerned. If my skater comes back and said, whoever it is, they told us a really neat trick, marvelous. I'll add that to my shopping basket of tricks. I don't have an issue with that. We've always been, we like to send our kids out to other coaches from time to time. Before COVID, Piper and Paul went somewhere every year. And we this year sent Molly and Dimitri down to Washington with Elena Novak and Alexei. We're close with them. After Skate Canada this year, Piper and Paul stayed in Vancouver with Megan and Aaron before they went to Cup of China. And it's been great. It's been great. It was great for those coaches to have a different team and a different, something else to do. It was great for our kids to absorb how somebody else frames something. I don't think it's anything to be scared of myself. Perhaps when I was younger, I would have felt a bit differently, but now I feel I'm secure enough in what I do and how I do it. If you want to be coached by me, I'm happy to do that. And if you want to be coached by somebody else, that's fine too. I don't have an issue with it.
Have you lost teams? I think so many coaches are afraid of losing a team, going to the poorhouse, all of the things that go in coaches' minds. Yeah.
We've been very fortunate, actually. We've had teams retire and break up, but leave, not very often. Not very often. There's been the odd occasion where we've asked people to leave because of behavioral issues, but very few and far between. Very few and far between. So I I think we've been lucky in that respect. But it's a fact of the business. People come and go. Teams come and go. It's extremely rare to have the kind of thing I have with Paul, where he's been with me for more than 20 years. You know, that really is a very unique situation. It doesn't happen very often. So I think I must have done something right, because he's not a stupid boy.
Well, let's talk about that. You've had him for 20 years. Do you think you'll have him for 2 more months? Do you think you'll have him for 2 more years? What is that situation like, and what are those conversations had?
We've very much been going year by year. And I think that if they have something they want to do, programs they're excited about doing, and feel good physically and mentally, they will continue. If they don't, they won't. So we just kind of, we don't really talk about it much. And I always laugh because I say, oh, you're back again then. You're back. I just can't get rid of you, can I? No matter what I do. They really, truly love it. And they love the process of training, which I think is hugely important. They embrace the day-to-dayness of everything, which I think is great. We went this summer, I went back to England, the first time I've ever been invited to go back and do something. And I went and did their coaches symposium. And I took Piper and Paul with me as my demonstrators, and they were fabulous. And we just had a great time. We were only there for a couple of days. But I have this little piece of beat music that I use for our class. And I used it, and I put it on the one day, and the three of us were standing there. We all looked at one another, and I turned around and I said to the group, "This is the sound of home." And they all looked, and Paul and Piper were nodding, and I said, "We've used this music every day that Paul can remember that he skated with us. Every day." And he went, "Yeah, it's true." And Piper, same, since she's been with us, which is like 13 years now, I think. And it was just, I said, we use this every day. And I said, there is such comfort in familiarity that we put that music on in the morning, we take a breath, and off we go. And we're going to, in the words of Ted Lasso, make today our masterpiece, right? Yeah. And I think there's a great feeling of that when you do things like that. And that takes, I would say it takes 3 years to build any kind of relationship. A coaching relationship, a partner relationship, sometimes more. But it's a big process, takes a lot of time.
Now, I wanted to ask you about last year. Last year, Piper and Paul were on top of the world. They had the magic free dance. It was really doing well. A huge win at the Grand Prix final. And then the diagnosis comes. So at what were you worried that they were finished, about their careers? And how much did that affect their season? They did medal at the World Championships, but it seemed like the momentum had maybe turned, in their absence. And also, obviously, you had health concerns of just getting back to where you were before.
Yeah, that was, I mean, when she was diagnosed, we were just more concerned than anything that we would lose her, that she would die. I mean, it was cancer. So it was hugely serious. And they had agreed, the doctors had agreed she could skate until the Grand Prix final, do the final. And then they would do the surgery, but that she mustn't fall. It would really be a bad thing if she fell. And we're like, oh. And I mean, they actually don't fall very often, touch wood, she said, tapping every surface. But, as soon as somebody says that, right? So they go to the Grand Prix final, and the first practice, she falls hard. And I just looked at Iris. I said, we've killed her. We've killed her. That's it. We should never have let her skate. She shouldn't have got, I was beside myself. And then she got up and she came over to the boys and like, are you okay? And you're trying not to show, like you don't, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. And she was okay. But it was to be honest, it was terrifying. That whole Grand Prix final was terrifying for us. And then they won, which was unbelievable. Like I just couldn't, and to have the juniors and the seniors win for us, it was just a moment that will never be repeated. It was a moment in time. And then she had the surgery, and it was much more extensive than any of us thought, even her. They didn't tell her what they were going to do until they actually, sort of started. And then she was, obviously very frail after that. And it was really a question of, we just kind of got back to where they were, but we had no chance to grow anything or make any improvements or make any changes, because we had to go incrementally. When it wasn't like, okay, you've had the surgery and now you're off and now you can skate. It's not like that. There was physio. She was skating in a brace. She took the brace off a little bit early. She thought she was okay. Then she got a bulge. Then we thought she had a hernia. It was just, it's never, these things are never simple. They're never simple. And so in the end, we were just delighted for her that she was okay and that they were able to finish their season as strongly as they did. But we had no other expectations other than that.
How did they tell you they were going to come back for this year? Were you surprised, or did you expect
Showed up? He showed up. They went off and did their shows, and
everybody was waiting. His hair was bleach blonde at one point over the summer. That did not look like it was competing for ice dance, and it was back. So
yeah. No, they went off and did their shows, and then they took a break. They didn't take as long of a break this year. And then they just kind of, we were kind of talking all the way along, just, casually, sort of keeping in contact, really, not talking about anything in particular. And then it was just like, well, we're thinking of coming back on the la, you ready to go? Yeah, okay. And then they just, and I think when I don't hear from them, I assume they're going to skate.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not going to skate, they're going to tell me, we're not skating, So when the time goes on and it just keeps going, I'm just assuming they're coming back. And because I think if they're not, they're going to say.
Now, speaking of comebacks, Papadakis and Cizeron have been, hinting at a comeback for some time. How much do you think that would change ice dance, and how important would it be for the sport to have more stars in it?
It's hard to say. It's always good to have good skaters in competitions. So having two more good skaters is certainly not a bad thing. I think, again, if they feel they've got more stories to tell, then that's a good reason to come back. So, but you never know, what's in anybody's head. So I don't know them really at all. So I wouldn't presume to know what they were thinking. But it's always good when you've got good skaters. So, it will remain to be seen. It will be very interesting, I think, to see what they decide to do in terms of concept. If they do come back, that'll be an interesting thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's talk about looking ahead to the Worlds in Montreal. What do you think is possible for Piper and Paul this season?
There are a lot of Well, put it like this. There are 4 very good teams. They are all very close together. And I think...
Who's team number 4?
Well, team number 4 could be actually one of 3 teams. I won't specify.
I would say that there are 3 teams that are in it to win it this season.
Okay, we can go with that. I'll work with that. Mm-hmm. And I think they're all very accomplished. They all have somewhat different skill sets and ways of producing the work, which makes life interesting. They don't look like each other at all. And my hope is that whoever does the best job over the 2 days of skating will end up at the top.
This is bigger. This is, we hope, yes.
Well, it is ice dancing. We'll take that into consideration. But, that's how it's supposed to work in the world that we'd all like to live in. And to be honest, I don't think any of the coaches or the skaters have got any problem with that. When any of us wins, you know, Barbara and I always say to one another, oh, another good fight, you know, away we go. And it's not Charlene and Marco are lovely. Babs is great. We have a good relationship, you know. Madison and Evan, we've known them for years, since they grew up in Ann Arbor, you know, when he was young. And so there's no personal feeling going into it. But I think it's good that it is a real competition. I think the worst thing that happens to ice dancing is when you already know the result. Or anything, actually. When you already know the result, where's the tension? Where's the build-up? And to me, like last year's Grand Prix final, to me was that the definitive form of a good competition. They were all really close, and it boiled down to very small amounts of points. Personally, and this is just me, I don't think that any one of those three teams are 4 or 5 points better than the others. Unless somebody messes up hugely. I think they're all very comparable in skill, very comparable in technique, very comparable in speed. Like all the things are there. And then it becomes a little bit more about the vehicles and how do they perform the vehicles. But I don't think anybody is so much better than anybody else that it's a sure thing.
Well, earlier this week, we got an announcement that Russia was going to keep a bronze medal from the Olympic team event. Was that a surprise to you?
Kind of, yes. Because I'm not a mathematician, so like I said, but it seems to me that what they've done makes no sense. Again, horrible situation for that poor girl who was 15 years old, you know, kind of being hung out to dry, which is not, in my mind, correct. But there you go. And then you say, well, we're moving you up, and then we're putting them. How does that work mathematically? To me, if Maddie got moved up, she should get the points, and that gives us the 1 point extra, which I know is the simplistic way of putting it, but I think I'm right, correct? In that mathematical calculation. Oh, look at me doing sums and everything, Dave. This is your lucky day.
Yes.
But it doesn't make, what are we doing? What are we doing? And how much longer is this going to drag on for those poor kids? You know, any monetary value attached to those medals is gone now. I'm thrilled for the US and Japan that they're getting their, you know, medals. Canada really kind of stayed out of it because we didn't have a medal. So we didn't have a dog in that race. It was not our place to aggrandize ourselves to get a medal. It really wasn't. But this, now that this decision has come out, this is different. And now I feel, and Canada has stepped up and made an announcement. And Mike Slipchuk gave, I felt, a very good interview from Shanghai yesterday to CBC, sort of saying exactly that. Like, we don't understand how you can manipulate, if you like, that result to come out that way. It makes no sense.
You need your British frankness to talk for them because they are too polite and they need you to tell it like it is. Yeah.
Well, he did say that. He said exactly that. And I do hope that we come out with what my father would have referred to as a strongly worded letter.
Very strongly worded, I would think.
Worded letter, yeah. Containing what he also would have said as a few unkind words. Yeah. Because I think now I do feel that we're not being given the correct result, if you like. I didn't care before. I didn't care. We had no medal. I had no dog in that race at all. But it just seems to be, and if Russia appeals and Canada appeals, are we looking at another 2 years before those?
Of course.
I know. And by that time, it's like
you, Carolane. This is good because Piper and Paul, it'll take them 2 years to find out if they're Olympic medalists. So they will keep going for 2 more years to make sure they have an Olympic medal.
Oh my God, I don't know. Olympics is it's always been not the greatest for us. You know,
They need to flip it upside down. They need to turn it on its head.
maybe it's that time. Maybe, maybe it's this time lucky. You never know. We'll see. But yeah, I think it's just a horrible dragging on and on situation. I can't believe it's taken 2 years to get this to this point. And now we're doing this. I don't understand.
Let Russia investigate themselves, okay? Of course it was going to take this long time, but in my opinion, now Thomas Bach has been really clear that the Valieva entourage should be investigated. As a coach, what do you think the responsibility should be, or the culpability should be, of another coach if it's proven that they were involved in administering performance-enhancing drugs to their athletes? Do you think they should be from international sport? I mean, what is the protocol?
I mean, fortunately for me, I've never been in that situation, and I don't know any coach that I know that has. So
I would think Natalia
I
Dubova.
don't know what to do with a drug if it came up and bit me.
Well, I mean, Marina Klimova in 1991, I believe, was it found that she had taken steroids, and then the B test. Yeah.
I mean, we all hear these things, I think it's, as I said, I think a 15-year-old in that situation should not be the only one held accountable. That's what I'm going to say. I think that obviously there were adults around. If, in fact, she was doping, people knew and were complicit. End of story. So it should be about that. I mean, it's about that culpability as well. I think as a coach, we have to complete all these courses and codes of ethics and all of that kind of thing that you have to do. So having done all that, then we're responsible to uphold that. We in Canada can't even give our kids a Tylenol for a headache. It's not allowed. You can't do that. They can come and ask you, but you're not allowed to give them one. And I wouldn't. And we're very careful about all the list of banned drugs and, all of that stuff. It's actually terrifying. I find it terrifying. So I do think there is a measure of culpability on the part of the coaches, and they should be held accountable. Yes.
Now, you mentioned young skaters. How many young teams do you have? How young do they start?
Hang on. I have to show you something.
There's a mom that wants to know if you are interested in intermediate skaters. They're...
Wait a sec. Wait 1 sec. Okay. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. So this is Liliana and Jacob.
Okay.
And they're 8.
Well, I'm looking at your license photo with this long hair.
Oh, God. They're 8 years old, and they're in our development program. And they will be performing I'm not going to call it a free dance, their routine that I've put together at our Valentine's Day show. So I'm
what are the boards at your rink? And are there going to be decorations on the side? Because you have that interesting rink whenever they go.
We have a little stage on the other side, and that's where they're going to put, all the balloons and the hearts and the ribbons. And we had all the Christmas stuff up as well. Yeah, no, we don't have boards. It's great, actually. It's much less dangerous. You can get out of the way really quickly. But yeah, we have 3 development teams at the moment. They're the babies, and they only started last September. And he is actually the son of a former student of ours. And she posted a video of herself the other day skating at Scarborough 22 years ago. Okay, one more. And this is me.
Oh, wow.
Doing What's New Pussycat. When I was a little nod.
You still love it as much as you did then?
I love the process of skating. I love everything about it. I love my sort of tag is song and dance girl. I love music. I love dancing. I love the costumes. I'm a real girly girl. I love the makeup and I love everything. Makeup, hair, costumes, nails, you name it, I love it. And I grew up at a time where the coaches, well, that was my coach. That's Piri Horn, who invented with Courtney Jones the Starlight Waltz. She was my very first coach. And they were all, coaches wore skating clothes, you know, not like we do now, pants and whatever, but they skirts and dresses and the whole deal. And their hair was done, their makeup was done. They were totally glamazons to my little 7-year-old self. And that was like, and they charged like, you know, you could make money. They charged 12 shillings and sixpence for a lesson. And I thought that was like lots of money. Well, it was at the time. And you wanted to be them. And I always remember the story about the Russian ballerina, very famous. When she was old, she would still come to teach class, makeup done, hair done, beautiful clothes, the jewelry, the nails, and everything. And she was asked why, at her age, she still did that. And she said, because you have to show the little girls it's worth it. And I think it's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Not just the little girls, the little boys too. You know, it's you are, whether you know it or not, a very important part of their life. They spend a lot of time with you. They look to you for things you don't even know they're looking to you for. And you have a massive impact on people's lives. And so I think it's in, you know, I want them to think that skating is important, not the be all and end all of their life, but that when you come to the rink, you're dressed and ready to work. You don't look like a slob. You don't do that. And I'm not talking full hair, makeup, glamazon deal, but work appropriate. It's a workplace. You come in, I always tell them, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Right? So I said, imagine someone walks in the rink this morning and this is the first time they've looked at skating and they see you. What image do you want them to take away?
Well, let's talk about first impressions. I watched Freeze last year over Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
And Billy French was the breakout star of that show. What is it like working with that personality? You talk about hair, costumes, everything. I mean, his Instagram is very fascinating. What is that personality like?
He's marvelous. I mean, he's a very interesting young man. Very interesting young man. Super talented. He was accepted at Juilliard for dance, and has chosen, you know, instead to follow ice dancing. He's super. And we've had him now about a bit more than a year. And he had sort of a tumultuous time before that. Different partners, different coaches, different things happening. You know, when you watch the Freeze thing, so you know some of that background. And he'd actually come to do a tryout with us right before COVID. And had to leave because we were getting locked down. And so I didn't hear from them for a while. And then his mum called me about, you know, him coming, and he did. And we have found him a lovely partner. And they've just finished their first season together, looking now to season 2. He's a tremendous talent, a really, really hard worker. He's got great ideas about what he wants to do and how he wants to do it. Totally appreciative of anybody that coaches him. Just a very, and yes, he's kind of wild and crazy in a way.
We like that. We like a character. Yeah.
I love it when Nadiia at the moment, her hair's bright red.
Okay.
Bright red, and I love it. And it always reminds me, we had a very lovely judge called Jane Garden who recently passed away, and she always used to say, it's not the hair on the head, it's the brain underneath it. And it's absolutely true. And I mean, I think you have to be a little bit careful in the competitive season, you know, what you do, but in their downtime, I love it when they do stuff like that. You know, I used to do that. My hair was all different colors, all different things, all different stuff. You know, you name it, I did it. So I really appreciate when they do that. It's fun for me. I get to live vicariously a little bit again through them. I always tell them, you know, I have no life. I just live through you guys.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about Nadiia and Peter. You mentioned them. They were so strong last season. And obviously, it's so hard to move up to senior. There are so many good Canadian teams, and you get into the crunch, right, of so many teams that are so, you know, similarly bunched together with scores and things like that. You know, what kind of were the expectations for this season, and where are they at?
Well, they actually achieved their goals. We had our goals that we want. They entered senior, they looked senior, they got senior type scores right off the bat, which was fine. They won our challenge actually, and then nationals didn't go that well. Peter had a little fall in the free, and it was just not quite as good. Then you maybe don't know this. Then they went skating on Lake Louise. Peter decided to do a spin and fractured his fibula. So fortunately, he was actually very lucky. He almost did what Paul did and got the spiral fracture, in which case it would have been much worse. But it's a minor fracture. And I said to him, could you just not have skated up and down in a straight line and gone, that's a nice mountain. What a pretty view. No, he had to do a spin. So he's off at the moment. He's in a boot. Full recovery expected. You know, it's not too serious.
Dealt with cancer last year. Who cares about a little fracture?
Now, you know, again, in the scheme of things, it's a recoverable thing. But I said it's a good lesson to learn. Actually, you know, you were still on the substitute list, and so maybe you should have. He's like, I know, I know. But they're super kids. Again, super hardworking. Embrace the day-to-dayness. They come to the rink every day wanting to be better, better than the day before. And they're very good with corrections. You correct, it's done. And I always think that to me is the mark of the ones who are going to make it. You know, when you correct and it's done, they're invested in keeping that right. When you find yourself saying, okay, look at your training book. How many times have I said that? And I keep notes. I keep daily notes on every team.
What should be in my training book? I don't always use this, you know.
Well, all the kids, most of them, especially the younger ones, we encourage them to have a training book at the rink, so that if you've received corrections that are important, or, you know, whatever, you write them down. Because the biggest lie we all tell ourselves is, I'm going to remember that. You're not. That's why I come home every day and I make notes on every team. And at the end of the month, they get those notes.
Okay.
So there's no coming back to me and saying, well, you didn't say that, or we did this. I keep run through stats, so I know exactly how many run throughs. We grade them by color, so I know exactly how good they were. So you telling me you've done 5 free dance clean run throughs, and I look at the sheet and I go, I don't think so. So it holds everybody. I'm a big believer in accountability, self-account. How many reps of that twizzle sequence have you done? Really? Let's look at the sheet. You said 15, I see 4. How many of them were clean? I would say, you're not cheating me when you lie about that. You're cheating yourself.
Are you the tough? Are you the heavy in the rink? How does it go between the 3 coaches?
John is kind of like the fun one. John's the fun one. He's the one like, oh, John told us we could do that. Yeah, did he? Okay, I'll be talking to him about that. I'm the keeper of the big picture. So yes, I probably am. I'm not mean, but I'm big on accountability. I've told you that before. I've told you that before 10 times. I need it done now. You want to improve? You want to get better? You want to make the free dance at Junior Worlds? You want to come first in the world? Then we have to, you know, it's not going to happen just because you go, I really, really want it. I always say to that when we have our yearly planning meetings, you know, I always have the kids list their goals for the season. Okay, I want to, you know, this and then, okay. And then my next question is always, and how do you plan to achieve that? Do you have a plan? So then it's not a plan. So I'm a big believer in planning, and they all are very good. I have to say, they're all very good. And the fact that they know they're going to get the notes at the end of the month, and it's going to say what it's going to say. So they have that. And again, it's very useful for Piper and Paul, for example. You know, we with the shorter run up, they've been able to look at what we did the last 2 years and really go, okay, that was really successful. Or we might need a 2 days more here, there to do this, or 1 day there, or that week we needed to do. And it's very useful when you set the next plan up. It's a comfort thing. I always say to them, if you've made a plan, that plan can always be adjusted, because no plan survives first contact with the enemy. It's a truism, right? It doesn't. So you have to be flexible. But if you've made a plan, it's way easier to say, well, I couldn't do that today. Today I've got a sore back. So I was planning a free dance run through, not doing it today. I'm going to do a comp run, or I'm going to do just big pieces, but I'll do it tomorrow when I was planning something else. And then you have it there and you know that you did it. I think that's huge. For me, it's huge. I respond well to writing things down, and I've encouraged that in my skaters, and they all do it. They'll all bring me a plan if I ask them.
Well, as we wrap things up, what's the plan for tomorrow at Four Continents? What should we be watching for? What are the key things that you're going to be looking at to making sure that Piper and Paul are having a good day tomorrow? What should we be watching for?
Ooh, that's hard to say. Hard to say. I think for me, when they live in the program, when you can literally see if the program flies by, it's a good one. And they're not struggling with anything. And sometimes I know right from the first couple of steps, you know, I can just say, yeah, this one's going to be good, or you know, sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. Nobody's perfect, but I think if they've gotten very much better at living in the moment, absorbing the feeling of, we're going to skate the program that's ready to be skated today, not the one we want to do at Worlds or the one we want to do in 3 weeks, but today's program. How we feel today, how we're going to invest our emotional intelligence in today's program. That's, for me, the key. If they do that, it'll be good.
Right. Well, we will be watching and making sure that they are going to be. Oh, you won't, but the rest of us will. Oh, after.
You can tell me how it went, right?
We'll tell you on WhatsApp. Yes. Carol, thank you so much. This was such a thrill to get to know you, and you lived up to my expectations for a good, spicy British commentator. This is great.
Excellent. And tea, of course.
And tea. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dave. Lovely to see you.